and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the one and only Rock and Wrestling Podcast. Glorious, no, I won't give in till I'm victorious, and I will defend. From far and wide and light years away, cast from the shadows and I light my way. You think you know me? I'm just a sexy boy. Oh, I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of every man. Without further ado, from parts unknown, your host with the most, Nick. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of
All right, everybody, welcome today to today's edition of the Rock and Wrestling Podcast. I thank you for joining me here once again. Last week we had 2 episodes. On Wednesday we had Matt Kuhn from Wide Ended, and then Thursday was a special bonus episode with Dr. Tom Pritchard. Got a lot of great response on both episodes. They were both fantastic guests. A lot of great stories from both of them. So if you haven't checked out Wide Ended with Matt Kuhn, do that, and make sure you keep on all the things Dr. Tom is doing. But today's guest is none other than Braden Blacker. He's from Concord, Bay Area, and we discuss all about his project, the metal festival that he's going to be putting on, which is August 11th in Berkeley, California. So we discuss all about that. He's a big wrestling fan, too. We get into some wrestling talk, what's going on with Roman Reigns, New Japan Dominion, all of that good stuff. So it was a fantastic interview. We sat down, we just chatted it up. This, like I said, another great guest where this is kind of what I envisioned with the podcast, just sitting down, talking, 2 guys talking about wrestling, talking about rock, whatever it may be. That's what we're looking for. So it was a really, really good stuff. I can't wait for everybody to hear that. That's going to be coming up here in a few short minutes. So I want to make sure that you're following the podcast on Twitter, Nick's R&W Podcast, Facebook, Nick's Rock and Wrestling Podcast, Instagram, Rock and Wrestling Podcast, on YouTube. Finally got all the videos up to date on YouTube, so go over there if that's where you get your podcast. Also, remember on Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes Radio, Podbean, all going to be on there. Wherever you can get your podcasts, we're pretty much up there now, except for a few apps. I'm still working on it, but we're pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, we're up there. So definitely make sure you do that. Also, make sure if you want to be a sponsor of the show, I'm still looking to get some sponsors. If you want to promote your podcast, promote your product, your business, whatever it may be, email me at rockandwrestlingpodcast@gmail.com. That is rockandwrestlingpodcast@gmail.com. Let's work something out. Also, remember, go over to patreon.com/RNW podcast. I got some cool things, some more interactive stuff. If you want to be maybe a little more permanent member of the show, have a weekly spot, even stuff like I will hook you up with free t-shirts. I'll hook you up with some free, whether it be WWE tickets, whether it be to a concert. So go over to patreon.com/RNW podcast. Help a brother out there. Also, make sure you go to prowrestlingtees.com/Rock and Wrestling Podcast store. Get your official merch. Going to have a second shirt coming up. I know I've been talking in the last couple episodes about that, but it's going to be up here in the coming weeks. It is the Rock and Wrestling Podcast Guns N' Roses take. Instead of the Guns N' Roses logo in the middle, we got a steel chair. It's a great design. Want to give a shout out to my man over The Creature Lives on Twitter. He is the man that designed the t-shirt, so it's going to be sick. It's going to be on prowrestlingtees.com. It's going to be on the store, so look for that in the coming weeks. Get yourself a tank top, shirt, whatever you want, and I'll definitely hook you up. Also, make sure you go down to on iTunes, give this a 5-star review, give a little write-up. If you do that, screenshot it, DM me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, email, whatever it may be. I'll hook you up with a free shirt as well. So before we get into the interview with Brandon, I just want to go over the coming week's schedule. I've been doing some scheduling, so we're going to be changing some things up here as I've locked in my schedule. Next week is going to be, I know I said I was going to do a Money in the Bank review, but I had a big opportunity, a big guest. David Penzer, former WCW ring announcer, is going to be next Wednesday, June 20th. Sat down with him for almost an hour over the weekend, so I can't wait for everybody to hear that. It's going to be a really, really good episode. June 27th, I have changed. I have got, it is Austin Gunn, Billy Gunn's son, who is just breaking into the business. I'm going to sit down with him in the coming weeks, and we're going to discuss some things. So Austin Gunn is going to be on June 27th. July 4th will be Eric, the guitar player from LA metal band Void Vader. July 11th will be AJ Kirsch. If you know, he was recently on the Stone Cold podcast. He was on the Tough Enough season in 2011, so I've got a lot to talk with him. Then July 18th is going to be, he's known as Cal Jack now, but he was Cal Bishop in NXT. If you've watched Breaking Ground on the WWE Network, you saw kind of the whole thing about him getting released. We'll talk all about that, his time in developmental there, and kind of what he's doing on the indies now. And then finally, July 25th will be a special interview with an owner of a wrestling company that is a startup. It's going to be a big startup. I don't want to reveal it quite yet. I haven't locked it in, but they've got a big event coming up in August with John Morrison and Jimmy Jacobs and all kinds of big names. So I'm going to be doing a little sit down with him, but I'm not going to give away all the details yet. So the next month is loaded up for you here on the show. So real quick recap. Next week, David Penzer, Austin Gunn, Eric from Void Vader, AJ Kirsch, Cal Bishop, and then finally the owner of a new startup wrestling company we're going to get on here. So really, really big stuff coming up here on the podcast. Make sure you follow on all the social media. Make sure you go to Pro Wrestling Tees. Make sure you give a review on iTunes. All that good stuff. I appreciate the support. Also, make sure, remember, if you're going to be at StarCast, I'm going to be on Podcast Row there. I will be there for the entire weekend, August 30th through September 2nd. I'll be there on Podcast Row Saturday. I'll be going to all the events. Make sure you come by and say hi. I'll be at All In as well. Just got my tickets in the mail for that today, so it's going to be good stuff as well. I will be at Aftershock here at Discovery Park in Sacramento, California, October 13th and the 14th. Great lineup of bands from Shinedown, Incubus, System of a Down, Slash featuring Miles Kennedy, Conspirators, Black Veil Brides, Monster Magnet, all kinds of good bands. Make sure you go to www.aftershock.com. Get your tickets now. You got single day tickets, VIP tickets, all weekend general admission tickets. Go over there, get your tickets now. I'm going to be at both those events. Come say hi. Going to be good stuff. So, coming up on the other side, Braden Blacker.
My guest here today on today's show is Braden Blacker, lead singer for Suburban Paranoia. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, dude, I'm so happy to be here, man. Like, I've been seeing your podcast, like, just blowing up over the last couple months, and this is super exciting just to, like, be a part of this. So thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, no, it's much appreciated. You got a lot of good stuff going on, so I definitely want to help promote, and hopefully we can get you some, more follows that way and get your music exposed to a bigger audience.
I hope so too, man. So what's going on today? I mean, other than talking to me.
Well, I want to start off a little bit and just give the listeners a little background because your main project that you are right now is Suburban Paranoia. So tell a little bit about kind of what kind of band it is, band history, anything along those lines that you kind of know with the band.
For Suburban Paranoia, I personally have been a part of it for about 3.5, 4 years. Suburban Paranoia as an entity, from what I understand, has been around since the early 90s, or I think it started in 1990 with the guitar player Daniel Arruda, and it's just kind of done its own thing since the inception. It's gone through many lineup changes, and me being a part of it is no different. Done a couple little tours and released a little demo and last year, and now we're kind of just getting the ball rolling on finally writing new music and getting out there and putting a quality recording out there. So that's what's kind of going on with us right now. Plus, I'm actually gearing up for a show tonight at Vinny's in Concord, which we'll miss because this airs on Wednesday, right?
Yeah, you'll miss, but one of the things I in some research, because with my old band Motorized, we played a show, and I think we played a show right before you got in the band. They had a female singer, I think.
Yeah. There was a couple of them. There was Nina, and then there was Scarlett, who is a part of a band called Lip Shock right now.
Yeah, I can't remember who was the singer, but I do remember that it was. The music was good, but I would say the vocals, just for my personal taste, didn't fit. I was glad to see you guys in, because it seems that you've got more of the vocal stylings that fit that. Because it's essentially, would you call it thrash? What do you guys identify yourselves as?
I think the drummer Peter and Dan like to call it like thrash progressive, or like power thrash progressive, I guess.
Okay, so you can, I could see that, because you get, the elements of thrash are there, but I definitely see the progressive or power metal influences as well. So I could see that definitely going that direction. But I was glad when you kind of joined the band and kind of some of the demos and stuff I was doing, because I felt your vocal style fit the music a lot better.
Thank you. Thank you. No, that, definitely not to dish on the prior vocalists. They all contributed their own portion to the bands, and, it was a lot of fun to see them, because before I joined the band, I was actually a fan of the band, and actually, I performed on stage, I played shows with them, and I was actually friends with Nina, who was one of the vocalists of the band as well, and it was fun. But yeah, I have to share the same sentiment. It was like it didn't necessarily always fit very well. So like when I got an opportunity to audition for Suburban Paranoia, my first thought was, okay, I'm going to try my very best to add a little more grit to this, because this music is heavy. So it's fast, it's heavy, it's got melodic portions to it. So I'm going to try to throw some vocal grit on top of it. And I felt like it was missing that the entire time with the female vocalists.
Yeah, definitely. When you came in, you did mention you guys did a little tour. How was that, especially because, a lot of the guys I've had on, they've got management doing it. When you're kind of real underground doing it yourself, how was it kind of putting that together?
Putting it together was a challenge. Overall, our little tour that we did last year, it was overall a success. I'll hit the first part of the question in a second. Overall, it was a success, because we didn't really come out of pocket in terms of the money from our wallets. So every venue that we visited, we got our gas money, we got our small guarantees, we made money in merch, so that aspect of it was successful. Putting it together was a challenge and a learning experience all at the same time. The challenge came, typically bands don't want to play on a weekday. So we were trying to do the whole, week-long 9-10 day run where we're playing Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays and whatever. So trying to find bands that were even willing to fill out a bill in, say, Utah or Arizona was a huge challenge. We got it done, and a lot of the venues that we played were a success, but on a Monday, Tuesday night, they weren't like really huge like crowds or anything like that. So, but with that being said, the learning experience came where next time I book a tour without help from anybody else, I probably won't book a Flagstaff, Arizona to an Ogden, Utah showcase where, it was a 12-hour drive. Probably won't do that again.
Yeah, that's definitely a truck indeed. I would not. Flagstaff to Utah, anywhere in Utah is going to be a truck, but definitely I think that's a good learning experience. You guys have any plans coming up to tour once you get kind of new music out there?
That's the hope. No initial plans just yet, but if we do, we definitely want to hit up a Northwest kind of shindig, because we kind of did I'm terrible at I'm terrible what left and right is, east and west. Because before we did California, we did northern, southern, then we did like Nevada, we did Arizona, Utah, and then back to like Reno, and so we did like a huge circle. And I think next time the plan is definitely that we want to hit up Washington, Oregon, whatever comes first there, maybe Idaho, and venture off and into those states over there, and once again come on back, because as an independent band, we don't have backing, so everything that we're doing is coming out of pocket, or we're relying on like venue guarantees so we can actually get to the next venue. So but that's definitely the plan. We're trying to hit maybe October, November this year, and that's probably going to be a challenge since we've had a lot of changes within the band. So we're trying to figure things out in terms of okay, so who's playing guitar here? Who's playing drums there? So we've had a lot of changes, but right now, definitely for Suburban Paranoia, we have a show tonight, which doesn't matter because it airs on Wednesday. And then we have a show. Our next show is at Devastated Fest, which is August 11th. It is a festival I put together. And then after that, we are playing with Michael Graves of the Misfits at the Holy Diver in Sacramento.
Nice, yeah. Holy Diver's a great venue. I've seen a couple shows there. I played in it back when it was Starlight, but now I'm really happy with the turnout that it's turned into Holy Diver.
Oh man, 100% turnaround. Wow. Like you said, man, I too played there when it was Starlight Lounge, and it was cool. But it was very old timey feeling. So, they came in there, and I think, if I may be correct, it's owned by Ace of Spades now.
Yeah, it is owned by Ace of Spades now. So, I mean, that was the thing with Starlight. It was just, I think a lot of those smaller bars that do music like that, it's hard when you don't have the backing and promotion. And now it's nice when you have the Ace of Spades people, because with their promotion and the backing and having the money to make the venue nicer, the sound nicer, all of that. The only thing I hate is the fucking stairs, man. The stairs just kill me.
Yeah. being a little overweight and having to truck 90-pound, 412 cabs up the stairs, 3 or 4 times a night is not fun.
Oh, dude, we played a show. We did our EP release show there in 2016, and it was one of the longest sets we did. We did 2 hours or so, and by the end of the night, I was
God
like,
damn.
I'm gonna come back in the morning and get my shit. I don't even want to carry it down the stairs now. I'm tired. This is gonna be ridiculous.
The first time I played there when it was still Starlight, I forget who we played with. Oh no, it was one of the final tour stops. Oh, it was the final tour stop of our tour last year before it got reverted into Holy Diver. First time we played there, like we walked in, we went, ah shit. It's like, ah. After 9 days on the road, our final date is, stairs. What was it from like Kung Fu Panda? It's like, oh, my worst enemy, stairs.
Yeah. Well, we played with a couple bands where guys had like, it seemed like they had a 100-piece drum set. I said, good luck logging that up and down the damn stairs all night.
Yeah, so by the time it came to our set, after loading everything up, like at least I personally, I can't attest to the rest of the band members. They might be in better shape than me, but like I was just like, okay, I need a 5-minute break before we go on stage. Give me an asthma inhaler. Let's do this. Let's rest. Someone get me a towel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only bad thing about that place is the stairs. But as we're talking here, I want to get a little bit away from Suburban Paranoia, kind of get some background, kind of your musical influences, what got you into deciding, hey, I want to play heavier music. What were some of your projects before Suburban Paranoia?
All right. Well, basically, when I was 14, I'm 34, so I got a brisk 20 years in this good old music business here. When I was 14, I started out playing in a hardcore punk rock band. What do they call it? I don't know, hardcore punk rock, and I sang for a band called Bloodstool, because at the time, like, being like a freshman in high school, I was like, oh man, I love the Nerve Agents, I love AFI, I love DRI, I love Damnation, I love all of these old punk bands, I love Tiger Army, so, kind of fell into like the darker kind of punk rock roots. And it just kind of steamrolled from there. From there, like, I fell into like punk rock fell into hardcore fell into metal, metal fell into everything else. Everything has a subgenre nowadays, so I can't really, I don't know. If it grooves, I like it, man. So my past experiences was, I did Bloodstool, I did some band called The Burning. I mean, these are all the high school days, which don't really matter. I mean, we've all been in bands in like high school that lasted like a year or two and then just kind of dissipated, I guess. Oh, I was in a band called Dissipate for like a cup of coffee. Let's see. Yeah. To kind of answer your question without glossing over it, as it seems like I'm doing, I think before Suburban Paranoia, the most prominent thing that I had done was a band called Giving the Devil His Due. And that started on May 30th, 2010. And it was pretty much just like a two-man metalcore project with me and another guy named Joe Butler, and he played bass with me, and we just had a drum machine backing us. It was absolutely terrible.
I mean, the concept's actually very clever,
Yeah, like we kind of followed suit, because around that time, it was very scarce finding drummers. Like, drummers are usually the unicorn of at least the East Bay area. So, because I live out here next to Antioch, so like finding a drummer that's willing to play like metalcore, anything around that vein is really rare. I'm not exactly sure nowadays, but back then I was like, okay, cool. I'll just program some shitty beats on Reason, and I'll pump them through a PA system, and we'll play to it. I figured, because at the time I was living with a dude named Aaron Johnson, who fronted a band that originated a similar thing called RU36. And if you don't know what RU36 is, definitely look it up. It's some interesting stuff. And Aaron Johnson was a very interesting person. So I took influence from him, and I was like, all right, you know what? If he can do it successfully, I'm going to pump drums through a PA system, and we're going to go play live. And that was pretty terrible. And eventually, to fast forward, it ended up becoming like I played drums and I sang lead vocals, and then eventually I started playing guitar, and then that steamrolled into us finding a new singer, and then we had a band, and that band fell apart for a couple of years, and then it came back with all new members, and then me just playing drums, and then that fell apart, and when that fell apart, I joined Suburban Paranoia. So there's the Cliff Notes version.
I mean, it's a clever idea too, because you say in the East Bay finding drummers, Sacramento bass players. You can't find a bass player that wants to play hard rock or metal to save your life.
Oh my gosh. Like, you know, or if you can't find a bass player, so you have to recruit everybody who plays guitar to play bass, and then eventually they just end up leaving because they want to play guitar. You ever ran into that problem?
We never ran. We ran for about 4 years, and we had, like, when we got started, we had an original bass player, and then he left the band. We never technically, for the rest of our 4-year existence, had a bass player. We just knew a guy that played bass and was, like, almost a hired gun in a sense, that he just came and played bass with us, but we never had an official bass player. And it was like, how the hell are we functioning? We don't even have a bass player.
I feel that so much, man. I've been in that position so many times. But it's always it's kind of like what we have in Suburban Paranoia right now. I mean, not to leak too many internal secrets, but like, right now we have, our drummer, Peter. He is on baby duty right now. Congratulations to Peter. He just had his first child with his wife. And so we've been having he is a member of our band, but his name is Scotty Milne, and he also plays bass in a band called Gershock. And he's been playing drums with us. He's been playing guitar. He plays bass. Like, he's a member of the band, but he doesn't have, like, a designated role. He just kind of does whatever's needed at the time. And it's like chaotic, but it's super helpful at the same time. So we are forever indebted to Scotty and his, like, dedication to what he does, because he's just crazy talented. So.
That's good when you've got almost kind of backup way, because as an independent band, that sometimes you run into that where you're like, well, so you know, whether it's a drummer or guitar player down, you don't have nobody back up, but you've got kind of like a fill-in guy. That does help.
Yeah, the technical term that we call him our auxiliary member, because he just shifts into any role, and I'm just hoping one day he doesn't shift into the vocal role, because that's my role. I want that role.
So I'll go back here. You mentioned Devastated Fest. Kind of how did this come about? What exactly is it? And tell the listeners kind of where it all started.
Oh man, so Devastated Fest was something out of sheer determination and motivation, out of wanting to put together a festival that was run right and run fair. With that being said, like, way back in the day, probably like, 2011, 2012-ish era, the first or second iteration of Giving the Devil's Due, we went down to LA to play some fest called Zombie Fest. Now, it was fine, except everything was super crazy. Like, no bands were running on time. There was sound issues. There was just crazy, chaotic festival things happening at once. So, like, you know, when we got there, we were the band from out of town. We drove down to LA to play, you know, but before we left, they were like, okay, you're playing at 3:00. Now you're playing at 6:00. Now you're playing at 9:00. But we get there and we're playing at like 4:00. It's like nobody had any of their shit together. It was just crazy chaotic. So me and the bass player at the time, who's a terrible person. I hate that guy with a passion. I'm not going to mention him. We were talking. He's like, yeah, we can make a fest better. That fest sucked. And I was like, well, I wouldn't say it sucked, but you know, I feel like we could do a better job ourselves putting something together that's, you know, fun and more organized. And at first we started brainstorming some things and, you know, we came to a lot of disagreements. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this happen. And so I did. In 2013, I believe, 2013, I put together my first Devastated Fest, which was at the the Plea for Peace Center in Stockton. And my overall vision was I wanted to do something for underground music. So the first Devastated Fest was kind of a variety show. It was different genres. There was some punk rock, there was some indie rock, there was metal, hardcore, so on and so forth. And it was headlined by a newly christened band at the time called Hatriot, which had the singer of Exodus, Zetro. Zetro singing for him at the time. And it went great. Everyone was happy. It fit my vision, and I thought it was a great idea to, you know, just kind of get underground bands together and just kind of work together to make a fest that they can celebrate. So over time, that's kind of what happened with Devastated Fest 2, which was held the next year at the Oakland Metro, and that was headlined by Sacramento's own Conducting from the Grave. Each day, like, I think the first fest had like 22 bands, the second one had 25 bands, and this one this year has 18 bands. So it's a huge conglomeration of underground bands that can celebrate playing a sweet festival without like all the hardships and all the bullshit that other festivals would put on and put the bands through. You know, before I had bands selling tickets to play, and I realized that took a lot of the fun factor out of playing a festival. So this year, in 2018, there was a huge like 4-year gap in between Devastated Fest 2 and Devastated Fest 3. And that was because like the scene, in my opinion, just wasn't with it at the time. So from like 2014-ish, 15 to now, like it's improved a lot. A lot of cool bands. You know, the attitudes have improved. I started trying to do Devastated Fest 3. Sorry, I'm really long-winded here. My bad. I tried to do Devastated Fest 3 in 2015, and every band that I approached to play, they kind of just gave me attitude like, well, we're not playing unless we do this, or we're not playing if we have to sell tickets. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. And I'm like, wow, I approached like 30 or 40 bands, and I got a lot of the same kind of mentality. I was like, okay, you know what? This isn't cool for now. I'm going to shut this down and see what happens later. And Devastated Fest 3 came about, and I started seeing the scene thriving again. I started seeing shows popping up everywhere, at least in the East Bay area, the Central Valley, Sacramento. Like, you know, you see metal shows everywhere now, at least in this 50, 75 mile radius of the Bay Area. So that was exciting to me. And this year it's being it's being thrown at the infamous. I'm just kind of falling over myself. Sorry, whoever's listening. Devastated Fest 3 is being held on August 11th, and it's being held at the 924 Gilman Street in Berkeley. Do you know what that place is?
That's a legendary place, man.
Oh, yes. It's dirty, it's grimy, and it's perfect for what I'm trying to do. It's a place where you go inside, and it's just covered in graffiti. It's got 30 years worth of amazing musical history. And it's perfect for what I'm trying to do for Devastated Fest 3, which I have given the moniker of Heart of the Underground. Because for this year, I've recruited 18 bands who have just been killing it on the road, killing it recording, killing it, playing shows and, networking, and just all these bands have just been, again, killing it in every fashion and facet. And I couldn't be happier with the lineup this year.
Yeah, that's great to hear, especially to put together like that. How is it being the guy that runs it? Do you go, hey, everyone's got this set time, here we go, and do you just run it strict so you don't have a situation like you had in LA? Or how do you run it so that things move?
Well, I've ran it a pretty unique way. Like, as somebody who was born in the 80s and, was a teenager in the late 90s, I was, really stoked about Warped Tour. I loved punk rock. I loved, hardcore. I loved screamo. I loved all of that stuff. I've been to, 10 or 11 Warped Tours, and I went to Sounds of the Underground and all sorts of things that just seem like crazy, unique kind of lineups and setups. So with that being said, the way that I kind of run Devastated Fest is a contradiction based off of what we ran into in LA, because like other festivals, you have your normal, okay, this band plays at 3, this band plays at 3:30, this band plays at 4, so on and so forth. I kind of made it where, at least in my head, the vision that I have is that the bands don't know what time they're playing until they show up to the venue that day. In the past, I've been met with, what? How can we plan anything when this is happening? It's like, no. You're missing the point. The point is, it's put together that way because I want to expose other bands and other fans to other bands playing that day. So if one band has never played with another band from a completely different area, then they can network with them and set up other shows in other areas. Meanwhile, fans can get exposed to many other bands from many different areas and hopefully help their fan base as well by doing that. So that way, hopefully the vision is everybody shows up at the same time, whether it's bands or fans, and they experience new bands throughout the whole day. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, well, that's actually a great concept, because I think sometimes in teams, especially with the band, you may run into a little bit of ego, like, well, we should be here. This way, you kind of hey, you get what you get when you show up.
Yeah, and this year, for bands in particular, I'm not having anybody sell tickets. From a promoter point of view, people are going to look at me and go, what? Oh, man, that's going to hurt you in the process if you don't make bands sell tickets. And it may, especially this year, I'm kind of playing things close to the chest here. But that's okay, because I'm doing this for the love of the fest, for the love of the bands, and the love of the heavy metal and hardcore community. So that's okay. Now, all of the bands have to do is promote the show and tell their friends, family, grandmothers, foster parents. Like, I want everybody to come to the show. It's all ages. So, yeah, man, it's a lot of work, but the only expectation I have for the bands is they promote the show and they show up and play. So the only thing I ask of them is they dedicate a day out of their lives to actually be there. So I've had a couple bands reach out to me already, like, oh man, I don't know if, you know, we can get there at the load-in time and stay there the whole time. I'm like, okay, well, we'll figure something out. But in terms of like everyone else, no one else is complaining. So
Yeah, well,
go ahead. Sorry.
it's a great concept. So I do like it.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely going to be chaotic. At this point, I'm not trying to be in competition with other fests. Like here in the Bay Area, we have the Bay Area Death Fest, which is actually happening right now, and in my opinion, is pretty much like the Super Bowl of heavy music out here. And then there's also the California Death Fest, and then I'm kind of hoping I could slide in Devastated Fest is like the third bronze medal award winning you know, festival of at least the Bay Area. So here's the hoping. And ultimately I do want to grow it, but I don't ever want to see it become anything like Warped Tour size, because I love the underground. I love keeping it small.
So let's change gears a little bit here, because just like me, you're a big wrestling fan. So obviously,
Yes.
I guess, when did you become into wrestling?
Sorry, can you say that again? You totally blurted out here.
Oh, no worries. How did you get into wrestling? I wanted to shift gears and talk a little wrestling here. So how did you become a fan into wrestling? We've all got that unique, oh, I saw so-and-so on the TV. How did you get into wrestling?
Ooh, thinking. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, you know what? Like, when I was like 4 or 5 years old, my very first foray into what professional wrestling was seeing the Ultimate Warrior run to the ring. As a little kid, my mind was just blown. I was like, who is this giant chiseled individual, colorful individual running to the ring and creating havoc in the ring and just mowing over dudes? And I was just like, what? I need more of this. Like, and you know, as much shit as the Ultimate Warrior gets, you know, he was super influential to me, to liking what professional wrestling was. Like, for me, like, early on, that was my guy. Him and the Macho Man, like, polarizing figures, just really spoke to me at the time. Like, I was never a Hulk Hogan guy. I never bought into it. Everyone was like, Hulkamania. I'm like, ooh, yeah, give me the Macho Man. Like, so that's kind of how I got into it. And I kind of watched wrestling, like all the pay-per-views as they kind of came on as I grew up. And then eventually like Monday Night Raw came on TV. And I was like, oh, wrestling is on cable. Oh my God. And then every week it was a ritual. Every single week I'd watch Monday Night Raw or the War Zone, and then SmackDown came. Oh my God, SmackDown. I love SmackDown. I still love SmackDown. So yeah, for me, man, it was, you know, I started out with all the polarizing, colorful figures, and it just steamrolled from there. I was, you know, at the time, I didn't even recognize that it was a sport at the time. I was like, what is this thing? I'm entertained. You know, just glue my eyes to the screen.
Yeah, well, yeah, I grew, you know, Sting is my guy, and that's where I got into it, was the Monday Night War. I was a WCW guy way before I got into WWE, and watching Sting, the Crow, man, beat up an entire group of like 50 dudes with a baseball bat is like, dude, I don't care what. This is amazing.
Oh man, like, yeah, dude, like everybody else, I used to switch channels, back and forth on Monday Night Raw and Nitro, and it was just like, you know, there was very few times where I was always a WWE guy personally, so there was very few times where I'd actually like leave it on Nitro because there was always cool shit happening on Monday Night Raw. So like I'd flip it back. I think one of the only times I really kept it on Nitro was when Hogan showed up and became the mystery member of the NWO. I was like, what? That motherfucker!
Well, yeah. See, what was weird is out here is for the most part, like Monday Night Raw was always later, and I was younger at that time, so I would tape Raw, and then I got to watch the night live for some reason because it would play at 5 o'clock on TNT. So I'd watch Nitro, and then the next day watch Raw.
Okay. Getting smart with it.
I recorded both of them, and I'd watch them all week. Like, that was just how obsessed I became. And then I was like, people have should be thankful they have DVRs now. That you had to go buy yourself some VHSs and recorded it, and like, hey, that was how you did it.
Yeah, I never had that luxury as a kid, so I always had to be a slave to the time slot. So I was like, I gotta go watch, so no matter what I was doing at the time, I was like, I gotta drop doing chores, I gotta drop doing homework, I gotta drop. Sometimes I'd call in sick to work. Like I'd go and watch wrestling, man. I was a fanatic, and I still am. Like, even my girlfriend now kind of rolls her eyes every now and then. She's like, "Oh, we got to watch a pay-per-view today." Like, yes.
Oh, that's the same way I am. I'm like, dude, there's pay-per-view on. My Sunday, that is my Sunday. I'm not doing anything else but watching that pay-per-view.
Oh man, how do you feel about TLC coming up?
Oh, you mean Money in the Bank?
Money in the Bank. Duh, sorry. Yes, Money in the Bank.
It's going to be an interesting pay-per-view. Lately it's been weird. SmackDown has been on fire, but Raw has had some bad segments lately with the Lashley stuff and the Roman and gender stuff. I don't know what they're doing there, but SmackDown's been on fire, so I'm interested to see kind of stuff on the SmackDown side more than the Raw side.
Oh yes, 100% agree with you. And NXT's been killing it as well on a whole separate. I could go a whole episode on NXT. I love NXT. But yeah, SmackDown is pretty amazing. AJ Styles, man, they knocked it out of the park. WWE knocked it out of the park getting AJ Styles a part of their brand, man.
Well, he was definitely a guy that I always had a radar on, but I didn't think he'd end up being this big in WWE. I thought that they would kind of keep him in that mid-card range, but he's blown up. I mean, he's been the face of that SmackDown brand for 2 years now.
Who do you feel is the most underrated superstar on the roster, the total roster so far?
It's tough to call. There's a lot of guys that they don't use, and that was what disappoints me in that. I was hoping with the brand split you would get to feature more guys, but I really think they're missing the boat with Lashley because you want a guy that's legitimate to face Brock Lesnar. Lashley's your guy, and you brought him back and you put him in a program like this. I think they're just missing the boat on him. Underrated is a tough one to call because there's a lot of good talent out there. I mean, I even think a guy like Zack Ryder could be used way more in a better way.
Oh my God, yes! Like I've been watching Zack Ryder ever since he started with the ECW WWE brand, and he's super underrated in everything that he does. Like I was stoked. I was the only one because I forgot. Oh yeah, WrestleMania. I think last year, the year before, one of those years, he won the IC title in the ladder match, and I was like super pumped. I was up, jumping up and down. I'm like, Zach did it, Zach did it, and everyone else in the room's like, okay. Like, come on, man, give him some credit. He deserves it.
Yeah, and it's so weird today with the product because they kind of do what they want. Because when Fox gives you $1 billion for SmackDown, you're kind of like, well, our product doesn't suck apparently because they're going to pay us $1 billion for one of our shows. So that's where it's kind of like a conundrum where there are alternatives in New Japan. There is your Ring of Honors and all of that, and there's everything going on with All In, but it's still there's not there's not WCW, there's not ECW, there's not that alternative product that you go, well, if I really don't like this, I can go test something out.
Yeah, I agree, but New Japan's killing it, man. Like, I'm just now, like, I'm a late bloomer to the New Japan product. So, you know, within the last maybe 4 or 5 months, I've been really kind of kicking into it and seeing what they have to offer. And man, the wrestling's amazing. It's an entirely different product from what we're used to with like WWE and stuff. You know, and one person I'm super impressed with is just Cody Rhodes, or Cody. You know, ever since being underused in WWE, he's just been, you know, making a killing on the independents in New Japan and just everywhere else.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal, and I think he set the blueprint for that. You don't have to stay in the WWE if you want to make money in professional wrestling. There's other places, and you can go and do it yourself. I just think there's a lot of guys that are afraid to because, you know, Cody did have some name value, but I think a guy like Dolph Ziggler would be like, dude, he's not. They've killed him so much with the stop and start pushes that he just if he went out and showed up in a Ring of Honor, he'd be more over today than he ever was probably in WWE.
Oh my God, you are absolutely correct, man. Can you imagine him in the Indies? Ooh, like even now, like he's got the name brand. He'd just be a younger, more in shape Jericho.
Yeah. There's so many guys on the roster. If they would do that, they'd be better when they came back. You know, I mean, look at McIntyre. McIntyre was terrible in his first run. Went out in the Indies, killed it. Now he's come back, and now they're like, well, this is the superstar we want, and they're going to push him to the hilt now because they're like, wow, it's totally different. I think that it's so different in the WWE model because, you know, you go to the Performance Center, you go to NXT, you kind of get there. They don't really get their craft down worldwide anymore like it used to be in, you know, the territory days or even having the option to go to WCW or ECW.
Yes. So, with that being said, like, I kind of mentioned Jericho a little bit earlier. Did you get a chance to check out New Japan Dominion yet?
Oh, dude, his match with Naito was great. I mean, I think it might have been better than the Omega match. I mean, Jericho's on fire right now. I think that New Japan went the route of having him win as well as Omega winning because the ticket sales have been slow for that San Francisco show. But now that both of them are champions, I think New Japan's they're going to sell some tickets because there's a good shot that if not one of them, both of them are going to be on that show.
Oh, man. And I'm ashamed of myself as a wrestling fan to say that I do not have tickets to that show, and it's probably going to be really hard to get tickets at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I think, too, one of the tough parts about it is they're going to they're going to the Cow Palace, San Francisco, and they're doing their G1 tournament. They still haven't had much exposure in America, so I don't think that as many people know about New Japan really you know, they're still working on being exposed to the U.S. because, you know, in Japan, obviously they've got their huge following, but I think they're working slowly on trying to build up their following in the U.S.
Do you think having a name like New Japan Pro Wrestling would actually hinder them from being a success in the States?
It could possibly, because I think you're going to have your typical, you know, casual fans going to think, oh, it's Japan wrestling, it's nothing but Japanese wrestlers, and Japan definitely does have a different style of wrestling, so it's not. It could hinder them. I think they just have to keep. They're going to keep working on it. And I think when you got Jericho coming over doing stuff, and you got the Bucks and Cody, that helps when you got some American names. And I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to draw more American names to their product so that people will go and watch.
Yeah, yeah. And, so it's kind of a crapshoot in a way because, I mean, I don't think, in my opinion, WWE will ever have another WCW as a competition. I don't think it'll ever happen. That's why I asked about the whole, do you think New Japan will actually be hindered for being called New Japan in the United States? It's like, unless they started getting like massive TV appeal and network exposure and so on and so forth, I don't know if WWE will ever have that competition again.
I really don't think they'll ever have that competition. I think that the best shot that they had was when TNA really was. I mean, you look at all the guys when they had Rude and Joe and Styles, all the guys that are in NXT now. Had they had the proper management and the money to back it, they could have gave WWE a run. But I don't think we'll ever see it again. It's just WWE is too much of a monster for anybody really to compete with them.
Oh yes. All right, so I got a loaded question for you. I got two quick loaded questions for you. What do you think of the Enzo Amore case?
I was never a fan of him, of his, him and Cass were a good tag team, and they were hot for a while. But once they split him up, I just thought he was goofy. His in-ring stuff is not very good, and it just was, I just tongue-tied there. Recently listened to a podcast where Simon Gotch said all Enzo did was had a formula. He'd come out, he'd say his two catchphrases, he'd say something, diss somebody, and then hit him with more catchphrases. And then you go back and you're like, he did have a formula. So I was never a fan of him. And, whatever they decided in the court case, and he's doing his rap thing now, either way, I was just, you know what, thank God he's gone. Because 205 Live is 10 times better now without him on there.
I was a fan of his charisma, and what he had, but once he started getting mean, at least in a WWE form, once he started getting like mean and kind of ill-tempered, and like the way he came across in his promos and kind of his overall attitude, I just kind of started losing. I was like, this guy's just not likable anymore. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. Like his in-ring work was something to be desired. He was small. He just didn't measure up. So it's cool. It's cool that they broke him up, and then stuff happened, and here we are with him with a rap song on what was that website called? West Coast Worldwide or whatever. Worldwide? I forgot what it's called. Anyway, what's that?
That it's something like that. I checked it. I listened to about 30 seconds and turned it off. I was like, this is terrible.
All right. So last loaded question: Roman Reigns. What's your thought?
We could spend another hour dissecting that. I'll keep it short and sweet. My take is they missed the boat on him. To me, it's really a failed experiment in that the storyline they had going with Brock into this Mania should have been planted 3 years ago at 31.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it would have worked then. Trying to place him as an underdog, like Daniel Bryan's, not going to work. Like, that's a terrible idea. Daniel Bryan was the management didn't see him as a champion. This is the guy that you're putting in every spot. He's doing the press conferences, all of that. So he's a great wrestler. There's no defined character. I think they missed the boat when he came out of the Shield. He should have been Goldberg, Batista, just running through people, not saying a damn thing. Would have got him over like he was in the Shield. I think the minute you gave him a mic and started description, what he was saying, nobody bought it.
Yep. I echo the same thoughts. I feel like at this point, as everyone, everybody in the internet wrestling community has said, Roman Reigns needs a repackage. He needs to turn heel. He needs new music. He needs new attire. He's a good to great wrestler. Other than his Brock Lesnar matches, he's, in my opinion, never had a bad match per se. Like, he can go pretty much with anybody, but the mic skills suck. His booking sucks. And that's not necessarily his fault, but man, he needs to say no every once in a while.
Yeah, it's, and it's, I've heard the other side of, well, who do you replace him with as the face of your company? To me, Braun is hot right now. Braun's the guy. I wish they'd just pull the trigger and go with him against Brock, because Braun is super over. I think Seth's pretty over. I really am disappointed with how they used Finn, because Finn was my guy in NXT. The whole demon character, I think that could have been the face of your company, and you can sell merchandise, anything demon on it, I'll buy it, and imagine everybody else. So they have options. I think they've dug their teeth in with him so far that at this point it's like, well, we'll just go with him.
Yeah, so those are all my loaded questions, man. That's all I got with those.
So, but you're definitely one of the longer guests I've had on the podcast. I appreciate you coming on, talking all about Devastated Fest, Suburban Paranoia, talking a little wrestling. So real quickly, where can we find Suburban Paranoia's music? Where can we find stuff about Devastated Fest?
All right, so Suburban Paranoia, you could find us on, of course, www.facebook.com/Suburban Paranoia. There's also www.suburbanparanoia.bandcamp.com. That's where our last CD demo is posted. More to come with that. Devastated Fest, you can find us at www.facebook.com/DevastatedFest. There's also an event page on there you can join if you're interested. Devastated Fest is going to be August 11th at 924 Gilman Street in Berkeley, being headlined by Ty Payne, which features live and recorded members of Exodus, Ministry, Megadeth, El Nino, Warbringer, Hyrax, and more. Also on the bill, you have Short Fuse, Cursed, Bavmorda, Hand of Fire, Suburban Paranoia, Gershock, Carnificina, War Troll, Name, Infinite Sleep, Wastewalker, Nothing But Losers, his name's Robert Paulson, Sworn to the Black, Sudden Loss, and Inanimate Existence. And that is, once again, August 11th. And it's all ages, 2 stages. Come on out and thrash with us. That's the promo line.
All right, man. I appreciate everything. Good talk, good chat. And thanks for coming on, man.
Sorry for being long-winded, but I appreciate this awesome opportunity, man. Thank you so much.
You are most welcome, man. Thank you.
All right. Take care, man.
All right, I want to thank Brandon for coming on the show today. Great conversation. Make sure you check out Suburban Paranoia on their Bandcamp, Facebook, all that good stuff. Go give them a listen. Really, really heavy, kick-ass, heavy metal band. Make sure Devastated Fest as well. If you're in the Bay Area, Northern California area, you come on out on August 11th down there in Berkeley, California on Gilman Street and go see 18 terrific metal bands. So make sure you do that. Want to thank him once again for coming on. So make sure you're following the podcast on Twitter, Nick's RW Podcast, Rock and Wrestling Podcast on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Nick's Rock and Wrestling Podcast. If you want to be a sponsor for the show, you want to have a weekly spot, you want your podcast, your business, your band, whatever, your wrestling event promoted, email me at rockandwrestlingpodcast@gmail.com. We'll talk. Make sure you go over to patreon.com if you want a little extra bonus content at patreon.com/RNW podcast. Go to prowrestlingtees.com/rockandwrestlingpodcast store to get your official merch. Gonna have a second shirt, probably a third shirt up in the next month as well. So good stuff. Please make sure you interact with me on all social media platforms. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to just chat wrestling and heavy metal and rock and roll bands. It's good stuff. I enjoy it. So please interact with me. Money in the Bank is this Sunday. Definitely will be active on Twitter during the event, as well as NXT TakeOver on Saturday. I think that's going to be a hell of a show. So please interact with me. Look forward to hearing from all the new listeners I've got, thanks to Wide Ended and their sponsorship. So make sure you check out all the social media, and make sure you check out all the other podcasts I always talk about. Let's support one another. Make sure you check out Brandon's band, Suburban Paranoia. Next week, as I mentioned, will be former WCW and TNA ring announcer David Penzer. He's also going to be at StarCast on Podcast Row. We talked all about that, and you'll hear that next week. Make sure if you're going to be at StarCast, at All In, come say hi. I'm going to be on Podcast Row on Saturday. I'm going to be at all the events at StarCast. I'm going to bring you some exclusive content right here on the podcast from StarCast. October 13th and 14th, I'll be at Aftershock in Discovery Park. www.aftershockfestival.com. You get your tickets, single day, weekend passes, VIP passes, all that good stuff. Check out the lineup: Shinedown, Slash, featuring Miles Kennedy Conspirators, Alice in Chains, System of a Down, Godsmack, Monster Magnet, more and more. Bullet for My Valentine. Great bands. Make sure you go and pick up your tickets for that. I'll be at the event. Come say hi if you see me at any of those events. If you're going to be there next week right here on the Rock and Wrestling Podcast, former WCW and TNA ring announcer David Penzer. Until then, interact with me on the social media, buy a shirt, review on iTunes. Until then, we'll see you next week right here on the Rock and Wrestling Podcast.